Welcome to All Bodies on Bikes, the podcast, where all bodies are good bodies, all bikes are good bikes, and all rides should be celebrated.
All Bodies on Bikes is a movement to create and foster a size-inclusive bike community. So join your hosts, I'm Maggie.
And I'm Marley.
As we explore the complexities of the biking world, help us break down barriers and create the world that we want to see. And don't forget that all bodies really means all bodies, not just larger bodies, but bodies of all sizes, ages, races, abilities, genders, sexualities, and beyond.
Come along for the ride. Hi, friends. This is Marley Blonsky, one of your hosts of the podcast. And before today's episode, I just have something short to say to all of you. We were contacted by a listener who made an incredibly valid point, and it's just something that I want to talk about before we get into today's episode. In our introduction episode, we asked that you call us in, that we talk about the hard things, and when we mess up, that you take us to task. And one of our dear listeners did just that. And for that, I am super, super grateful. This person wrote to us and said in our last episode, we used some exclusionary language, especially to transgender and non-binary folks. I'm not going to repeat that language. It wasn't a slur, but suffice it to say that we can do better and we will do better going forward, especially when talking about men and women and females. And we just need to be more specific. You know, if we're talking about people with vaginas having saddle pain, we should say that because, as you all know, we can't assume anybody's gender based on what's in their pants, nor should it matter to us. It's none of our business. And so I'm just really grateful to this listener for writing to us and letting us know that we need to have more inclusive language and we need to do better. And I would invite all of you to do the same. So if you do ever hear us say something that you want us to be better at, or think maybe we could do better on a topic, please write to us. Let us know. podcast@allbodiesonbikes.com. This is intended to be a space for us all to learn and to do better. And I am really grateful to be in this space with all of you. So we will do our best to do better. And I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hi, Maggie.
Hey, Marley.
How are you doing today?
I'm swell. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm tired.
Good.
I just got back from a road trip.
Yeah, how was Texas?
It was good. I drove to Austin. I didn't realize it was 9 hours each way. So I might have spent more time driving than I did on the ground.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Got to go for
Sure.
a gravel ride with Abby Robbins, who's going to be a guest next week on our podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And then we did a group ride, which was my first group ride of the year. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
How was your weekend?
It was good. What did I do? I went and saw my best friends in the whole wide world last night and had set aside time. I was going to get there at 5. I was going to leave at 8. They put the kids down, I think, around 8, and I finally left their house at 11:30.
Oh my gosh. Those are the best visits when you can
It
just
was so awesome.
be fully present and you lose track of time.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about our guest for today.
Let's do it.
Who do we have on today?
We have on just a really spectacular human person. Her name is Yasmin Boakye. She is a Ghanaian-American cyclist, triathlete, and all-around badass from the Maryland suburbs of DC. We met her, I guess you as well. I'm speaking for you, Marley, because she was a member of last year's SBT Gravel cohort. And she fell in love with gravel cycling through that and has since raced the DC area group Melanin Base Miles. She's ridden with them and ridden from New York to DC as a member of the second annual 1928 Legacy Tour. She's currently a member of the Grit USA Multisport Development Team. She's doing just a little bit of everything, just all the stuff. And she loves vegan pastries, Samoyeds, and creating space for greater inclusion and equity in the amateur sporting world.
Dang. Welcome to the show, Yasmin.
Woo!
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. That was the best introduction ever.
Well, you wrote it, so
Exactly. Great minds. Great minds.
But Maggie's voice reading it aloud just brought everything to life. I feel so special.
Right? I want Maggie to narrate my life.
Oh my God.
And there goes Marley. We don't know what she's doing.
Oh man, I feel a TikTok series coming on.
Oh my gosh, yes, please.
Just me narrating things.
Yes, definitely. Well, Yasmin, you've got so many awesome things going on, and I'm looking at your bio, and there's like a couple of things that just pop out to me immediately that I want to ask about. First of all, happy Black History Month.
Thank you. It is a great month to be a Black person in America.
It is. I'm obviously not a Black person, but to hear stories, to learn history. I just started watching the 1619 Project, and I'm just like having my mind blown. And I wish that we were having so many more of these conversations. So really grateful to you for taking time out to talk with us. And can you tell us a little bit about the 1928 Legacy Tour?
Oh my
This
gosh.
wasn't on the question list, but I want to know about it.
Yeah, it's so funny. So I don't know if you knew this, Marley, but like, so I was on as Maggie mentioned, I was on the SBT Gravel team. And that was it was that very first meeting when we were all like getting to know each other. I don't remember what time of year this was anymore. Time has like flown.
It did.
But I remember there were, I think like at least 15 or 16 of us on the call. And I was like trying to match like stories to names to faces on Zoom. And I remember Daniela was introducing herself. And she's a fellow cyclist, woman of color she was in the DC area at the time. And so I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to connect with her. Like we're in the same area, we're all over the country. And then she mentioned offhand that she had done this thing called the 1928 Legacy Tour the year before. And it was a ride from New York to DC, honoring the story of 5 Black women who did that ride in 1928. And so I have to admit at that moment, everyone else was still introducing themselves, but I was like on Google, like, wait, what is this tour? This is amazing. Like who put this together? And there's a local woman in the DC area named Keisha Robertson, and she basically researched the history of this tour that these women did over 3 days. There were 5 of them, they were friends, and they just decided like for the joy of riding that they wanted to ride from New York to DC. And just thinking about the fact that like without GPS, without navigation, without safe haven, like without cool new bikes with lots of gearing, without spandex, like they did this ride. And there was just something, it was already a big leap for me. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but to even think about riding at SBT Gravel. At the time I had never ridden more than 50 miles before. And even that was a big thing. And so I was already like stretching my brain out into like, maybe I'll do a century at SBT Gravel in 8 months. And then as soon as I heard the 1928 Legacy Tour, I was like, guess I'm doing 2 big things next year because I need to figure out how to be a part of this. So it's funny to start off with that because the reason I even know about that tour was because of the community that you created. So
that's so cool. So it was a bike tour from New York to DC. How many folks were on it with you?
So last year it was 7 women were on the team. And in fact, this year I just went to the first meeting of the women who are doing it this year. I think there's going to be like 13 of them. So it's slowly but surely growing all over the country, which is really exciting.
Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps just hearing you talk about it.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
That's so incredibly cool. I learned about the bicycle corpsmen in I think it was World War II, scouting out routes, and just the really badass things that people, still do on bikes, but used to do, like you said, without any of the modern equipment or cell phones or GPS or, tubeless tires.
Right.
There's so many things we take for granted now.
Yeah.
So are you working as a mentor for next year's team?
I am. Yeah, that was something that the Keisha decided, there's something very doable, but also very terrifying about doing a 3-day tour because it was touring pace. So it was not like a race where there's all this sort of pressure and anxiety that comes from racing. But there was still like, even for people who have done centuries, there's still a fear of like, okay, I know I can do a century, but can I do another one the next day and then ride more the next day? And so for pretty much anyone who does it, regardless of their cycling background, it's a step up in effort and training and seeing what you can do on a bike. And so Keisha wanted to make sure that the women this year had mentors, support who could talk about what it feels like to go from like noodling around on your bike in your hometown to doing this huge ride over 3 days. So it's really exciting to get to support them in that way.
That's so fantastic. You're going to be really good at that.
Oh, thank you.
You're
I'm
going to be really good at that.
trying my best.
Well, so that's kind of where we're at now. How did you get into cycling? What's your biking background?
Yeah, so I was never like, I always had a bike in college. I was like the person who's like buy a bike from Target and then leave it in a ditch and get it stolen. And like
Sure.
I was like had bikes around, but was never very serious, never even knew, to be honest, besides, I'm sure many people are like this, besides Tour de France, I never knew there was anything else besides casual riding and then like professional riding.
Yeah.
And my entry point was triathlon. So my dad and I used to run together in high school. And I remembered he told me at one point, like, always really wanted to do an Ironman. And I was like, what is an Ironman? And he explained it to me. I'm like, that sounds very hard. But he never learned to swim. Neither of my parents were swimmers. And so it was really important to them that growing up, that we learned to swim. And so both my sister and I are slow swimmers, but we know how to do it. And so it was one of those things where like I had this thought of, I know how to swim, I know how to ride, I know how to run. I'm not particularly amazing at all three, but I can try. And so during the pandemic, we all had a lot of free time. There were bikes floating around. And so I was like, let me just try out like designing my own triathlon, which is one of many bad ideas I'm sure today. But yeah, that's how I ended up. Like my dad actually had won a bike from his job, like an old random mountain bike that had been in our garage, kind of rusting away. So I borrowed that from him. I started, at the time I was dating someone who was a bike commuter. And so started like trying to ride around Baltimore, just like figuring out gears and hills and all the things. And then in 2020, I ended up doing that like self-designed triathlon. So I ended up like swimming at a pool and then riding my bike from like the border of Baltimore down into the Inner Harbor. And then I ran in circles around the Inner Harbor to do my own little like sprint triathlon.
I love that so much.
Into cycling.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love the design your own thing.
Have you done more formal triathlons since the design your own?
Yeah. After that, I was like, I guess this like wasn't too bad. And it'd probably be better to like not be riding through random areas on a Strava map that I designed poorly and like never tried out until the day of this race that I made up. So after that, I got very involved. One of the huge privileges I see and opportunities in triathlon as a like overall, there's still like a lot of problematic things in the sport in terms of inclusion, especially the history there. But in terms of efforts, one thing that really connected me to triathlon was the fact that there is a category for women who weigh over 165 pounds called Athena. And I just thought that was really cool. Like, I was like, wow, there's like a special category for women who are not in these sort of stereotypical bodies in triathlon. And I ended up connecting with a coach who exclusively coaches Athena triathletes and had a team called Team Go Big. Her name's Kyla Lupo. She's an amazing human being. But she was doing this work and creating space for women in triathlon. And so once I had kind of designed and done my own thing, I reached out to her to see about competing at a real try. And so with her coaching and support, I ended up doing my first actual try in Chattanooga. And I chose that one because it was the Athena National Championships. So that was like, that was like the dopest thing to like not only be doing my first try in like a really cool town, but also around people of different the body types compared to your average try were just so much more inclusive. And not just the fact that it was our national championship meant that we got to race first. And so we were the first ones in the water and like, there's so much support and you're crossing the finish line and my coach was there. So it was such an amazing, like, I wish that for every person in tries that they would have their first one be super inclusive because many of them are not. But it gave me the confidence to show up at other tries and be proud of myself and my abilities as I continue to compete overall.
I love that. I'm not going to lie. I almost signed up for a triathlon a couple years ago. There was a Danskin women's triathlon, I think in Seattle, and I got super intimidated, mainly by the clothing. Cause I was just like, do you wear the same thing for all three? Am I trying to like put a wet sports bra on? Like, and I didn't figure it out Can you explain this to me? How
The
does
clothes are such a problem. So yeah, this was part of the joy of being on Kyla's team, was like we had weekly team meetings and she would run through topics like the nutrition is also a big scary thing for a triathlon, like transition. How do you get off a bike and run when you were just biking and you don't want to run anymore?
Yeah, like, are you running in a chamois?
So triathlon suits, they have a really thin chamois, so it's meant to not hold water. So I would say it's like a third of the thickness of a regular chamois. And then my big thing was like, boobs, where do they go? This suit doesn't have anything going on. So I did not realize until connecting with other women, like most women wear a sports bra under their tri suit, or like I'm sure some people who have less issues with booby jiggling things like maybe don't, but most of us do. And so a lot of these materials like actually will dry out pretty well on the bike, like the airflow kind of gets dry, especially if the weather is good. And then by the time you're running, you're pretty much dry, which I was surprised by, because I was just like, there's no way I'm getting out of water and like not toweling off. And then you do towel off like a little bit during transition. And in longer races, another thing I didn't know was some people will literally just change all their clothes. Like I thought you had to wear the same thing.
Yeah, same.
Right. Yeah. And then I was like, there's actually bathrooms and like changing tents at Ironmans where you can just do a full, like, people even put like lipstick on in the middle of the race. People do all kinds of things.
Heck yeah.
I love
These
it.
are all the like, secrets that I had no idea until I started connecting, particularly with women who talked more intimately about these things.
I think similarly, kind of on the gravel side, like our steamboat meetings last year, it's one of those things where if you've never done a long distance event of any type, you don't even know what questions to ask.
Yes.
So I would love to talk to you about, what drew you to apply for the steamboat gravel team and to make the switch from triathlon to gravel or to cycling. And was it a switch? Do you still do both?
Yeah, great question. I do still do both. I'm sure I've told you this before, but like I still am baffled by the fact. So I saw the post that you did on Instagram, like apply for this team. I did not even know what gravel meant. Like I didn't know, like I'm from Maryland, from the suburbs. I've always lived in cities for the most part. So I didn't even know gravel roads were a thing. I didn't know what a farm road was. I just was like, oh my God, all bodies on bikes. That's all my brain could respond to. And I was like, SBT Gravel, whatever that means. Like, I want to ride with these people. So I remember recording the video. I was just like, yeah, I think you had asked, like, do you have a gravel bike? I was like, no, but like, I'll find a bike. I know how to find bikes. Like, I'll figure it out. Best thing about it was the time frame, because I think we applied in like either October or November, and it wasn't until August. So my brain instantly went to like, we've got tons of time to figure this shit out. Like, we're just going to go for it. So when I got on the team, when I was like, okay, I need to figure out what is gravel, where do I ride this gravel? What kind of bike can I use to get on gravel? Like, it was like, okay, this is time to determine what this actually means. And that's kind of, funnily enough, what led me to Melanin Base Miles, because I was like, I'm going to have to find some gravel in this area. And being in a city, I'm sure y'all can identify this in different types of ways, but like, if you're in a city, you probably have to go somewhere else to go find gravel. And that's really intimidating. And one of the things that Melanin Base Miles works to rectify is the fact that if you're going to like certain parts of Virginia or certain parts of Maryland, you don't want to go by yourself and ride these maybe private, maybe restricted farm roads, be out there with like no technology and not know what you're doing and ride, road riding has its own issues of safety, but I think sometimes with gravel, there is what I've noticed now that I've gotten more into it is there tends to be an assumption like gravel is just the safer thing. It's so much easier. It's so much better. And it is fun, but you want to feel, especially as a person of color, you want to feel like you're safe when you're going to places where historically people of color have not been invited to. So that was, a long story about how I got into gravel, but it's been a joy to figure out what it is and to enjoy the process of getting to know like the local gravel scene in now Maryland and Northern Virginia.
So there is a gravel scene. You can get to some. Do you have to drive a ways?
Yeah, it's a ways. So with Melanin Base Miles, there most of those folks are based in either Richmond or DC. And so we would go to Loudoun County, which is very well known for their awesome gravel. That would take about, depending on where you're coming from, like 45 minutes to an hour and a half. We would be traveling just to ride. So it would really turn into like an all-day event. There's no gravel within cycling, just like, you have to cycle like 30, 40 miles to just get to a trail. So
Yeah. And that's enough of a ride on its own.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm like, want to come back from that. It does not sound fun at all. So.
I want to go back just a couple minutes and really acknowledge what you said about, a lot of folks just off the bat say, oh, gravel's safer because there's no cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of that myself. And it really is coming from a place of privilege where I'm not questioned when I'm out there, or I don't question my inherent safety. I do sometimes, because sometimes I present as queer or more queer than others or whatever it might be. But that's a really valid point. And I think we should all just take it in and realize that, your experience on gravel is not the same as somebody else's. And just keeping that in mind when you maybe invite friends to go for a ride, are they going to feel safe there?
Yeah, that's huge. I think I've gone on some rides with at this point, I have expanded my cycling community. It's very diverse. I really enjoy the folks that I ride with. But there are some folks who are a little bit more willing maybe to take a risk, right? When a sign says this is private farmland. I personally don't want to be caught on someone's land that I don't know who they, and that's not something that I know there's people who have varying degrees of fear, regardless of what your identity is, because of whatever past experiences you've had. But I would just say that, especially thinking about private land, the fact that you're on a bike, the fact that the service might not be good, those are all components of what makes someone feel safe or less safe on a bike. And so I think, especially as gravel is working to be more expansive and inclusive, I would just be interested to keep seeing narratives around what is the larger community doing to make sure everyone who shows up on those rides feels safe and protected and confident when they're out there.
Definitely. And you talked a little bit about Melanin Base Miles, but can we back up? What is Melanin Base Miles? If somebody's curious, how do they find out more? What is it?
Yeah, so Melanin Base Miles is amazing. There's a woman named Sheila who's based in the DC area. She founded this group to basically break barriers when it came to gravel. She got into it. I think it started in 2020 or maybe 2019, and wanted to open up that space for cyclists to identify as people of color to be able to go to different events and rides and feel comfortable. And so last year I applied to be on their scholarship program, which basically provided entry into a local gravel race here on the East Coast. And then they did these wonderful training rides where they also taught us what is gravel? How do you ride? Again, I did not know phrases like off camber. I honestly still don't really for real know what that means.
I don't either. It's okay.
I have no idea.
I feel so seen right now. But these are things even when you would listen to a beginner podcast of oh, we're just going to talk casually about bikes. I've just found that the getting from 0 to 1 with bikes is really hard. And just trying to get people to explain to me how to change my gears or how to descend better. There's just a barrier at times and sometimes I don't know what can be done to cross that or to make things a little bit more beginner friendly. But they really helped me in terms of people on the group ride actually giving me tips and advice from a place of positivity. And I think that's what I love about it the most, is it's a group of people that have sort of defined the safe space on a bike for you to be a true beginner and to be honest about what's hard for you, which can be very different than a group ride where you're the new person and you're trying to figure out the vibes and people are commenting, but maybe not from a place of teaching, more of a place of mansplaining.
Yo, what's your tire pressure?
Right. Just mind your business.
That's a shirt. That's a shirt.
Yeah.
Mind your business.
Yes. Around my tire pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so it's just the goal is again to create that inclusivity. And funnily enough, I think this will be the first maybe Melanin Base Miles / All Buddies on Bike Connect, because we're all going to be at Mid-South in a couple weeks, which is really exciting. So
yes. I got the chance to meet Sheila at Rooted Vermont, and you're right. She really is just a powerhouse. And, she saw the need and said, I'm going to do something about this. And I think if more folks did that, it would go a long ways.
Yes.
Yeah. What distance are you riding at Mid-South?
So I'm signed up for the 100. I am just hoping. They posted something a couple of days ago, like, weather looks great. I was like, keep it that way. I don't need the weather to change for the next 1 month, because I feel like that distance, and it's amazing to say this because a year ago I had not even ridden 100 miles before ever. But somehow that distance has become doable for me. But what's not doable is mechanicals, mud, rain, snow, any inclement weather. So I'm fingers crossed that that'll be a good experience somehow.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, to give an even more well-rounded view of you as a person and an athlete, can you share with everybody how you did SBT last year? Because that's one of my favorite things that happened while we were in Colorado.
Yeah. So SBT, you guys have to remind me, there's like a 37,
64, I think.
Yes. And then 100 and 144. So we had a lot of options, which is really cool. I would say I had not seen that at a race before. Like with triathlon, usually pick these very different distances and things like that. So that was like really awesome to have choices. But as I mentioned, because I had never ridden gravel at the time, I was like, I don't know what this is going to feel like. And then on top of that, I also had never ridden at elevation. So I had a lot of anxious moments in the Zoom calls with y'all where I was like, I want to do 100, but I don't know if I can do 100. There's a lot of drama around that. So I ended up signing up for the 64, but I knew in my heart of hearts, I wanted to do the century. And so there was the way they designed the courses is also really cool because they all kind of loop together in different ways. And so I was on the path doing the 64 and I was like feeling good. And it was a nice day. All of my beautiful humans from Zoom were in my real life and we were feeling the warm feelings. Like the vibe was so good. And I saw the split for like the 100 and the 64. And I was like, are you really going to do this? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go do this. And I had not prepared anything. Like I had the fitness, which was great in terms of just, I had been riding a lot to practice. But in terms of like mental preparation to ride 100 miles that day, it was not there. But it was awesome. I ended up connecting with another team that was there, was the Ride for Racial Justice team. And we had kind of like casually interacted with them. But there was a woman on that team who I ended up catching up to. And at one of the rest stops, she was like, you want to ride the rest of this together? And I would never have been brave enough to like, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she just asked me that. Like, I feel so seen. And I was like, yeah, girl, let's ride. And so it just ended up being to be representing all bodies on bikes and like riding to the finish line with someone from Ride for Racial Justice and just feeling like seen, like all the identities, all the things, all the goodness, all the space opened up. It was such a magical day.
I don't think I realized that was your first entry that day.
So it wasn't my first entry, but it was the first gravel of any distance. Like, I don't think I had ridden more than like 40 miles of gravel and definitely the most elevation. I mean,
for sure.
That's amazing. I hope you're still like feeling the glory of that, because I remember hearing that I finished, and funny enough, I had similar experience. I met up with Alicia from Ride for Racial Justice and we rode together, and it really was powerful to be riding together. But I remember coming across and somebody told me, yeah, Yasmin, I think is doing the 100. And I was like, what? And then you came in very shortly after I did, because I had a hell of a day out there.
Yes.
And I just remember seeing that smile on your face. Like, I was like, yeah, she deserves to be proud. That's so awesome.
It felt so good. It was definitely one of those moments where like you really learn. I think that's something we talked about all year together, but like how to check in with your body. And I would say, even though I have been doing all these like, sports, triathlon, I had really always had a very fraught relationship with that idea of like, check in with yourself, see how you feel. It was always like power to the finish line, get this done, like very negative patriarchal concepts of fitness that I'm always trying to undo. And so this was one of those moments where I had to genuinely check in. I'm like, do I want to do the 100 because like, what's the real reason here? And it
Yeah.
really was like, my body feels amazing. I feel so well trained. I'm breathing air. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to breathe up there. So it's like, the air's okay. I'm not lightheaded. Like I'm good. So that was, I think the biggest thing was just having a genuine moment of true appreciation for like this body that I've worked so hard to like train and fuel and take care of and get enough sleep and hydrate. And it was all coming together in like a really beautiful way.
And you weren't even on your own bike.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, goodness.
We talked about that a couple weeks ago with Greer, and I think that is probably still one of her favorite stories from Steamboat Gravel, to just be able to, relieve the stress. Cause it was like, oh my God, I just, been training all year for this thing. And then my bike didn't show up. What do I do?
Yes.
So just the power of community.
Yeah. And that was one of those moments too, where it's like, I tell people this every time I tell that story, but what was meaningful is like, we had Greer's like personal phone number and she answered the phone. And for me to like be having this freak out moment, but know who to contact, I try not to shade Ironman too much, but they're problematic. But like, if I showed up at an Ironman and my bike wasn't there, it would 100% be like, you're just shit out of luck. There's 2,000 other people here. Who are you? And SBT had just as many people as an Ironman would, but what was there was like a clear, direct line to support. And even if she hadn't been able to come through in such a personal way, I also knew I had like 20 people on the ground who would do anything to help me. And like Bernie was like, I know the specialized reps here. Like I'm gonna them and see if you can borrow a demo. There's no reason you shouldn't have a bike at this bike event. Like it's a bike place. So that was to me what took it over the top. And again, just the feeling I've just never felt as included at anything as I feel like I did on that day.
Oh, I love it. And that just warms my heart, because that was the goal with it. And you put these intentions out into the world and you work towards it, but you never know what's actually going to happen on the day of. So I'm really, really grateful. That kind of leads me to my next question. And sorry, Maggie, I'm talking a lot because I always do. What advice would you give to other women or just people from underrepresented communities who want to get into triathlon or gravel or whatever activity of choice it might be?
Yeah, I would definitely say one, there are a lot of spaces out there. I think like between Meetup and Facebook and Instagram, like there's so much happening. One of the things I would say that I don't think I initially realized is like even Instagram. I always felt like, oh, that person's, has thousands of followers. I can't talk to them. And then I realized like, these are just regular people. And even if they don't respond, that's like, I have that ability to reach out. That's part of why they're putting themselves out there. So a great example of that is like when I did my first half Ironman, it happened to be the debut race of Sika Henry, who's the first Black female professional triathlete ever. And this was in 2021. So we've never had in the history of the sport.
That's wild.
Right. I'm like, what is going on here? But that said, so we did the same and it was amazing because I'm like, oh my God, she's doing her first race. I'm doing my first race. Like, this is incredible. And so I haven't told this story, but the first time I attempted that distance, I actually had a bike mechanical basically at the very end of the bike ride. So it was like a 56-mile ride. And at mile 50, my bike was like fell apart and I could not finish. And that really sucked. And so I ended up sort of processing that and writing about it on Instagram. And I tagged Sika and I was like, despite this being a rough day for me, I ended up like being really excited to be there during Sika's first race. And she replied, and I was like, oh my goodness, like a professional athlete replied to me. So it's all a long way of saying that I did not realize how, like now I know people who know her personally and like how small, especially for women of color, these communities are, but also that smallness, as even though it can be sometimes sad to be like one of just a few at a race, that also means that there's a lot of connection and connectivity between those folks to be found. And I think that just, I'm sure y'all can speak to just generally, like there's all these different intersecting identities where you can actually access people
For sure.
who are similar to you, but maybe seem like miles apart or feel like they're a lot more advanced, but end up being great resources. So that's a long way of saying that even though it can feel a little bit disconnected to be a minority in the sport, you are super connected through all these different avenues to feel supported, even if that support is coming from someone very different than you.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I love that. Did Sika have a good result at that triathlon? Do you remember?
She also had a robbery, so
Oh no.
that was another bonding experience. I think I won't like put words in her, but I know she posted about it, and it was just like really, really challenging. And she has an amazing story as well, where she had come back from significant injury to be able to show up at that start line. And so there was, again, just a lot of beauty in seeing like she's very, very honest about how difficult the journey has been for her in terms of like support and feeling like she's supposed to be there when it comes to lining up, but also feeling the weight of that representation. So again, at very different levels, it was really beautiful to feel like there was some similarity in our stories there.
For sure. One of the other podcasts on the Feisty Media Network is a triathlon podcast. And I know all the podcasts are trying to do stuff to honor Black History Month. So I'll have to pass on her name and get her. We'll definitely link to her in the show notes. I guess we've kind of dug into this a little bit, but going back a little bit, obviously being part of an affinity community is fun and it makes you feel like you're welcome. Why else does it matter? Why else is it important?
Yeah, I just think one of the things that doesn't get always talked about is sometimes there's this idea that making space in a community for individuals is all about like giving them resources, like, oh, we'll, bring all bodies on bikes to SBT, or we'll bring Ride for Racial, and we'll give them resources to be there. But the other side of that is also showing what I like to call like the dominant folks in the sport, whatever dominant means in that particular space, that we are just as equipped to be there, and we are there for our own reasons, and those reasons matter. And if we're just keeping it real, especially with like cycling and triathlon, which aren't the most thriving sports in the world, it's actually really important that those are made more inclusive for like the future of the sport. And I think it's easier for me to speak to triathlon because I have a little bit more understanding of like the larger framework there, but it's a sport that like has had a really high peak in like the 90s and 2000s and has like really struggled to maintain popularity compared to like things like gravel and trail running, like that are becoming, I think, more intentionally inclusive. I think triathlon has struggled because it's always been a sort of like bros sport for rich people. And now it's like, wait, we need more than rich bros to support this sport. What are we going to do? And finally, I think road cycling seems to be going through some of that too. So it's all a long way of saying, I think that it's important because I think people need to know that it's not just about like having inclusion for inclusion's sake. There's also very much the ability for folks who are outside of the traditional norms of these sports to help make the sports more vibrant, sustainable, possible for you to keep doing this. So that's just my big push for like, when you see folks who look different from you at the start line, it's not, I'm always wanting race directors to be mindful that they need to educate that main population of why folks deserve to be there, why their participation is valuable. And it's not just to have some token individuals, but to expand the sport as a whole.
I have another like maybe dumb question about triathlon, about equipment. So I ride bikes a lot. I know you need a bike. For triathlon, is it as simple as like swimsuit, shoes, and a bike?
Yes, it can be. So I always give the caveat of it depends on the race. There are some races that, like, I would imagine the women's triathlon would be a great place to start. Here in Baltimore, like the Baltimore Tri, it's actually sponsored by not a multi-sport group, but a running company. And I've just noticed that every triathlon has its own culture. So there's some cultures where you'll find people have all the gear and all the things, and it feels very intimidating. And then there's other cultures where folks are on mountain bikes, and they're just like, I've seen women ride the entire thing in a one piece, like on their bike in a one piece. My down there hurts just thinking about that, but they got it done. And then like literally running, like just throwing on some shorts and running. So I think it's not a myth that triathlon requires a lot of gear, because just still sheerly compared to like just running or just cycling or just swimming, it is more gear. And I think sometimes people try to downplay that it's like super accessible. It's definitely not.
Yeah.
But I think it is more accessible than the mainstream culture around it would have you think that it has to be. So.
That's reassuring. I'm tempted to be like, I'm going to put a triathlon on my goals for this year, but I'm not. Maybe is a duathlon is like 2 of the 3 an option?
I was just going to ask, okay, now I have to like step into my triathlete shoes, but
yes, please.
Like, so I guess, do you like 2 of the 3? Like, you obviously like bikes. Do you like swimming or running?
I grew up as a competitive swimmer. So I love swimming. Running is a really big challenge for me.
So through running, you can do an aquathlon or aqua bike. Wait, no, aquathlon is the one with running. Aqua bike is the one where you just swim and then you bike and then it's over.
That sounds great.
So you should totally do an aqua bike.
Yeah, I kind of already do that on social rides where it's like, hey, we're going to the swimming hole.
Yes. The one I want to do that's near me is a kayak, flat water kayak,
yes,
mountain bike, and then a trail run.
Yes. Wait, where is
that? That's at the U.S. National Whitewater Center.
Oh, because there's one just like that that's in like super, super southern Virginia. So I was like, wait, is that
right?
Yeah. Yeah, those sound really cool too.
Yeah, exactly.
To figure out how to kayak, like not just for fun, but like to get somewhere specific. That's the part I would
see. That's my thing with the swimming is I am the best at not drowning. At moving forward with any momentum, I'm not there. I don't have that.
I can teach you.
That is me too, which is why I do the river. I like triathlon to the river swim because the river tells you where to go. You don't have to. I know there's all these hacks, y'all. You can find any race that will work for you based on your strengths, which is something. I mean, we do that in cycling too, but I like that about triathlon, and I think that's another hidden fact is that it's all like swimming in the ocean. Like the rivers are not the cleanest, but they do get you where you need to go, which is kind of nice.
That's like a game changer for me in my head. I could swim downstream in a river.
Yes. I have
where I wanted to go.
Done for the 70-point free distance. I only choose the ones with downstream swims. And people who are great swimmers are like scoff, like you don't want to swim in the Atlantic Ocean. I'm like, no, I don't want to swim in the Atlantic Ocean. I have no interest in getting lost at sea.
Yeah.
And no.
Well, I think like common sense in endurance sports is really underrated.
Right.
Because it's like what we're talking about earlier with going out into like remote places. Like I will look into the area I'm going to and be like, there's a place near me that's really good gravel, but it's legitimately a cowboy town in the middle of North Carolina. And I was going to go ride there one day. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to go at like 3:00 in the morning. And the little voice in the back of my head was like, you're going to be around cowboys on a bicycle on a gravel road at 3:00 in the morning. It was like, nope, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yes.
It's like, there's nothing wrong with doing a downstream swim. I'm just smarter than you because you didn't think of that.
Right. That was like me. I went on a group ride yesterday and my dumb thing was I did like a long trail race. And the next day I'm like, I need to go on a group ride because I'm in a bike internet competition and we need to take a ride. Like just bad ideas on bikes. But it was super hilly and I didn't look at the elevation profile, which is my like fatal flaw in life is going on rides and not looking at the elevation. Be like, I'll figure it out. And like 25 miles in, we stopped at a farm store and I was like bonking hard. Everyone's being super nice to me. Like, you just need treats. You just need sugar. I'm like, no, I need my sister to come pick me up. Like, let me just keep it real with y'all. And that was like a crowning joy moment for me because I'm like, I made a bad decision. I followed through with 75% of the bad decision. But when I had an out of the bad decision, I left and got with my sister. And that is being an awesome cyclist too.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Knowing your limit and saying, this is not bringing me joy anymore. I am done.
Yes. And I think that's something that I've really learned again, going back to the idea of listening to your body. But I think something that tends to happen, I think, as you ride these longer distances, you're like, oh, wow, I'm so capable of like, I know how to ride 100 miles, or I know how to ride all these miles over a day. But then there's also like, I don't need to prove on every random group ride and every time I'm hanging with dude bros that I can hang. I actually can just be me. And if they judge me, and of course, this group was like super chill and super nice. And I think one big thing I realized is like most of the time people aren't judging you. They're thinking about how their own quads hurt and how it's also hard for them. And it's not about body type. It's about a lot of other things. But that's been a joy to just not always feel like every time I show up, I have to have this weight of like, I need to be strong and look a certain way and conquer the hills, that I can just be myself. And it's important for me to be comfortable being all varieties of myself, even as someone who has done these super hard things.
I think we could learn a lot from what you just said.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, we have a couple questions that we ask everybody. The one that I like to ask is, what does your dream day on a bike look like?
It involves just the right elevation where it's like you can like kill that one hill, but then the rest is actually downhill instead of what normally happens where they tell you the rest is downhill and it's not, and it's lying to you and you get really mad. So there's, again, just enough challenge, mostly downhill. If we have to get chased by dogs, they are Samoyeds and they are very friendly and floofy, and you like cuddle them. There's a whole pack of them. And then you like round a corner and there's a vegan bakery and it's like wafting amazing smells, and they have like gluten-free and nut-free options, so everyone is happy on the ride. And then maybe there's a swimming hole. I have not tried that, Marley, but like,
oh, you gotta
maybe
come to Arkansas.
I need to. I'm coming. I will be there. Like,
are you coming for the Gone Graveling Festival?
No, I have some other bike thing on that same weekend, but I'm setting the intention that I will come visit.
Awesome.
Here. And you too, Maggie. I'm gonna come see you in North
Heck
Carolina.
yeah. We have good swimming holes as well.
I need to figure it out because we do not have good swimming holes in Maryland. Maybe somewhere further from here, but in Baltimore, I'm like, ooh, toxic.
Yeah. Are there good public pools that you could ride to?
There is, it's funny. There is one, but there's a bunch of like secret codes that you need to figure out. Yeah, I know. There's problematic histories here. But yeah, I'm going to figure it out this year, how to get into that pool. But there is like a state park that has a really nice shoreline. So to give Baltimore some credit, it is a great place to ride. I don't want to like seem like I love living here. I love running and riding here, but bodies of water are very questionable, and it's good to know where that water is coming from.
That is so true. Another good bet is just like find a random sprinkler that's on and run through it.
I haven't done that.
You haven't done it
I
ever?
had the sprinklers turned on me on a ride.
Oh my God.
I had stopped to make a freaking Instagram post. This was during my fundraiser that I do every year. And so I had my phone out. The dude was less than 10 feet behind me. I was standing on top of one of the sprinklers and he turned them on to test them. I was like, you couldn't just be like, hey, take one step to your left. You couldn't be like, hey, I'm about to test the sprinklers. Nope, not at all.
Oh,
That's
I
great.
hope you
Thanks,
got
buddy.
that recorded on for your.
I cut right because when I stopped talking, I was like, what does that sound? Oh, okay.
Oh.
On like one of the first gravel races I did, it was like 100 degrees. I was supposed to be a 40-mile race, and I was like, so I'll be dropping down to the 20s because this is not necessary. I don't need to ride all these miles. But there was this terrible like 20% grade hill. I know. Now I'm like, why do we do this? I know. But at the top of the hill, there was a girl and she had a super soaker and she's like, do you want me to spray you? And I was like, yes, spray me. I need this so bad. So that's like the best water soaking memory I have of being on a bike and very much needing to be hydrated with something more than the water in my bottle.
That sounds amazing. I have a real quick follow-up on your dream day. I always forget that you're vegan because you're one of the few vegans who doesn't like, I'm vegan. And I'm probably going to piss people off with that. But what's your favorite snack to take on a ride?
Yeah, I love Untapped Maple, they do like stroop waffles. And like before I was vegan, I love stroop waffles. I love like warming them on my coffee and have these like, very romantic relationships with stroop waffles. And so when I found out they weren't vegan, I was like, oh, like another thing like stolen from my grasp. So I remember I was at a bike shop and they had these like little stroop waffle things. And I just get in the habit of like, let me just see if it's vegan so I can be like disappointed that it's not vegan.
Sure. Yes.
Yes, I know. Yes, sad. Oh,
no, I sport it.
I picked it up and I was like, wait, this is vegan. Oh my God. Started crying and tears came down my face. But yeah, those are my favorite by far for good ride fuel.
We should make Ted King listen to this and send you some vegan stroop waffles.
Sure, yes.
Untapped.
Eat all of them, literally.
Yes. all of them.
And then Maggie has a really fun last question.
Yeah, you are all the things. You do all the things. We've discussed that multiple times throughout the duration of this podcast. What is one thing you wish you got to talk about more, the more people asked you about?
I think one thing I wish more people talked about or asked about was like intergenerational connection in cycling. And then thinking about this because of the Legacy Tour, and one of the greatest like beauties there was the fact that there was a woman on the tour who's like by far the strongest cyclist of all, like crushed us in so many ways. And she's a grandmother and she was in her 60s, and just hearing her experience and wisdom, and that she made a very decisive choice to like get into cycling and into running like a nationally ranked duathlete in her like as she became a grandmother and her kids were out of the house and things like that. It was just amazing to be able to be connected to someone who's not, I think we get so caught up in like our age group and when we're in competitions, and then just socially, we tend to be around people who are our own age, but having that connection to someone who is in a different age category and getting to like connect about the same thing with them was really exciting. So I feel like there's a lot of possibilities, especially for women cyclists, to connect with each other across generations. And that's just not something that there's always like clear ways of doing that. Like even in Baltimore, when I think of like the different cycling groups, like the team that I'm on now is very much like we're all in our 30s pretty much. Right. And then I see teams out there and they're women and they're like clearly in a different generation. And so that's something that I've just been thinking about, or what are some like more direct ways to share that experience and create connections across those differences.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got my mind thinking now.
Yeah.
Well, I know that's part of like All Bodies on Bikes, like that's also a space for that. And I think
it is
not always maybe the primary way that we're thinking about connection, but it's very much there. Like we're all in the space. So.
Yeah, definitely. And because cycling, I mean, moving your body at any age feels good. But as you know, your knees start to wear out or whatever, cycling is friendly to all ages. And then, you know, if you need to, you can get or if you want to, you can get an e-bike or a tricycle or a recumbent. There's a lot of adaptation. Is that the word? Adaptations?
I think so. Yeah.
Changes you can make. But yeah, I think that would be a really fun thing to maybe focus on. Is older cyclists or older women in general. Because yes, you're right. There's so much wisdom to be learned, and we all think we're the first one to be heartbroken or left behind or dealing with XYZ. Nope. Generations have been going through this before us.
Turns out.
Yeah. Well, Yasmin, it has been such a delight to have you on. We will put your links to your social media, if you're okay with that, in the show notes, along with some information about the Legacy Tour, some information about the Athena category, which you introduced us to, and then also melanin base miles. Where else can we find you this year?
Oh my gosh. So I'll be at Mid-South. Super excited about that. I'll be in Iceland. So if anyone's doing the West Fjords Way
so excited,
planning to suffer with me, that'll be my big suffer fest of the year. And then I'm back at SBT Gravel with y'all again.
Ooh, yay.
Oh, that's
so exciting
too. So go triathlon, but go gravel more this year.
And if people want to catch up with you on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm at Yasmin Be Amazing, be like Megan Thee Stallion, my inspiration.
Of course.
Yes. And then I'm also the Curvy Afro Vegan for vegan knobs. I do try to keep my vegan identity muted and so So I appreciate that. Like whenever I go on dates, people are like, I didn't realize you're a vegan. I'm like, that's kind of like the appeal is like, I'm like a sexy secret vegan.
Yes.
Sexy secret vegan. That's the other shirt from this episode.
I know, like, where's this idea coming from? But yeah, that's where I am. And I'm super friendly, super open, super chill. So if people want to reach out about anything big or small, I'm like so happy to be supportive to anyone doing anything adventurous.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. And
Yes.
We'll be in touch soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
This is an All Bodies on Bikes podcast powered by Feisty Media. The show is produced by Maggie and Marley and edited by the team at Feisty Media. Thanks for listening.